What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another CTD lap guide. So obviously the GT4s have a new model. We're going to keep that conversation pretty brief. With that being said, there was a lot of changes to the GT4s. It's not just the tire model, and it's not just the aero balance and top speed. A lot of the cars got tinkering and suspension changes. The McLaren doesn't have brake bias adjustment anymore, etc., etc. So whatever car you're driving, make sure you look into what's changed for that car in particular. If you do have any questions on the new model, whether it's aero, speed, or the new tire model itself, feel free to leave a comment. We'll try to help and answer as many questions as possible. With that being said, we'll talk about how to approach some of this just briefly before we get into our lap guide. So the new tire model especially, I can't stress this enough, is to be early for everything. That's early for your braking zone, early for your turn-in, early preparation for the corner itself. We definitely can't drive this new update any more aggressively than before. If anything, it almost requires a smoother, more calmer approach to driving these cars, especially at the limit. So keep that in mind too. Anytime that you're doing your test driving, almost just as a reminder, every straightaway, just take a deep breath, focus on making sure that your inputs are rock solid, and you should be good. We'll get into our lap guide. So coming down the start-finish straight, just as an example, our old tire model, you can be pretty aggressive on the brakes here. My previous reference was between the 4 and the 500 board. Now we're looking anywhere between the 5 to 600 board. A lot of that's because of the new top speed these cars have. So coming into turn 1, we brake just at the 550 mark, so right in between those two boards. We're going to be downshifting from 6th all the way to 2nd gear. And at the 100 board, or just before it, we're going to use that last downshift into 2nd gear to help slow the car down, but more so to transfer that weight to the front axle, get those front tires to bite, and then just a little bit of slide from the rear end as well, so we can get the car rotated into the corner. Now, the Cayman in particular, it got some suspension tweaking. So previously, you couldn't really lean on a lot of these bigger curbs. Indy, for example, or the Turtles and the S's at Coda, anything that's that large, you kind of had to stay off of it. It's definitely a little bit better on this update, but my personal preference and for my consistency, I've been trying to stay away from these curbs. On this lap, you'll see I hit them here and there, but generally speaking, staying off of them has been more consistent for me. Now on track out of turn 1, we don't want to track all the way out to the left here. This is going to hurt our entry speed coming into turn 2. So we want to track out to about the middle of the corner. You'll notice that the distance to the left line is about the same distance to our right white line for pit exit. So right smack in the middle. This is going to let us open up the entry for turn 2, let us carry the most amount of speed possible. We'll use a little bit of trail braking pressure once again to set that front end up, get that front bite. We can get right up on the curbs here. And on exit, we want to make sure that the car is pointed either at a minimum at this building here, or better yet, in between this red canopy cover in the building to the right. Making sure that we're pointed there. As you start to build throttle on track out, we'll ensure that we don't track out too far and have to lift off throttle to stay on the track surface. Now coming into turn 3, we can be up on the curbs here because this is a long right-hand sweeper. We don't need to sacrifice any speed or open up the entry here. Coming into the braking zone for turn 4, right as we cross about the middle of the track, you'll see I'm starting to build just a little bit of brake pressure. This is to help set the front nose. If we start to use too much brake pressure, we can actually risk spinning the car. The other option, building too much brake pressure too early, is the car will start to understeer and you'll wind up out in the grass here, which is almost a for sure spin out. So we definitely want to be very gradual, be very nice to the car coming into this braking zone as it's so loaded up on the left-hand side. Now, as the momentum of the car starts to move more so forward than it does forward and left, or even left as a whole, once the car starts to straighten out, really settle, we can start to build our brake pressure up pretty high to get slowed down. Coming into the entry for turn 4, we're going to stay in third gear here. This is going to feel a little bit slow, but we can carry the most minimum speed into this corner in the higher gear. On top of that, we can actually start to build throttle pressure pretty early. That torque in third gear isn't as aggressive as it is in second. In second gear, you're also overslowing the car down to get into second gear. So it's really just a messy way. You can make it work, and if that's what feels comfortable, by all means, but third gear is the faster gear to be in here. We can get on throttle right before the apex, and on track out, we don't have to be careful with how far we're tracking out. This chicane coming up is pretty forgiving as far as what lines we can choose, so we can come out pretty far here. Now the trick is we want to make sure that we're dipping tires just barely into the grass. This is going to help us straighten up this chicane. And then as we come across, you'll see a lot of people will want to try to stay on the left side of this curb here. You can abuse this quite a bit. Left side tires on the curbing is pretty satisfactory for not getting an off track. If your left side tires are in the asphalt section entirely, that will be a slowdown, so keep that in mind. Now we want to stay and straight line the chicane as much as possible. Again, staying on the right hand side of this curb. Because we don't want to track too far out on the exit here. You can go past the white line in this curbing out here without getting an off track, but you are increasing the distance, and you're really not gaining any more speed or time there. So I do get all the way out to the curbing, but I do not go past it. Coming up to our next heavy braking zone. Once again, we want to be early for everything. So your next marker to use is going to be the 500 board, or right at the end of this grass. Now, again, this is just a reference. I personally like to gauge my distance from the reference as my brake marker. So I'm about a car's length before either of those two references. We're going to get the car downshifted all the way into second gear, and once again we'll use that last downshift. We can see just that blip of throttle there for that downshift. So blip, second gear, and that's going to be our point of turn-in. Now here you'll see me use a little bit of curbing here. This is probably a little bit more than I ideally want to. Now coming out of this left-hand turn, this is another spot where we don't want to track all the way out to the edge of the track. We want to make sure that we're just to the right of center here, and this is going to help us open up the entry coming into the S's. Now we'll use very little brake pressure, again, just to help set the weight on that front axle, get them to grip up and bite. Now we want to stay tight on exit here. Reason being, if we are coming off the curbs any sooner than here, we're really hurting our entry into this left-hander. So this is going to be a complex of compromise your exit, and that starts all the way back here. We want to compromise our exit, compromise your exit, compromise your exit, and that is all so we can get this last corner opened up on entry as much as possible. The sooner we're getting on throttle for this corner, the more speed we'll carry down this quote-unquote straightaway. We are turning to the right, getting onto the banking, but we'll still be flat out. So once again, the sooner we can get on throttle here, the higher speed we're carrying through that whole section, the less time it'll take, obviously, to get through there. So just backing up, we want to make sure that we're getting on the back half of these apexes, compromising these exits, all for the greater good of this last corner. And as always, just a little bit of that trail braking pressure just to get that front end to bite and grip up. Now coming into the last corner, I'm starting to brake nice and early here. On the old model, you used to get away with braking pretty late, really diving into this corner. We want to make sure that we're getting on the brakes and getting the car slowed down nice and early here. So something with the ABS, if you're engaging ABS, it does not hurt the tire temperatures as much as it used to, but it will still increase your braking distance. So we want to try to avoid ABS still as much as possible. And then the second half of that is if we are in ABS while turning, you will get a ton of understeer and the car will really struggle to start turning. So make sure you're getting on the brakes nice and early. It's better to get the car over slowed and you can kind of lift off the brakes and carry a little bit, roll a little bit more speed. Or if you over slow, you can delay that turn in and still wind up getting on throttle in a pretty similar place. If you blow that braking zone and engage all that ABS, there's not really any way to come back from that. It's pretty much just salvage the car and get back on track. And normally, what happens from there is you lose a lot of positions. That can start to affect a lot of your mindset for the rest of the race. So definitely want to avoid those situations as much as possible. Backing up, we are hitting just a little bit of that curbing for the apex as well. This is another corner where we want to compromise a little bit of our exit. We don't have to be quite as aggressively in the middle of the track because we have so much distance to play with before the car really starts to speed up. Now coming into the second to last corner, you're going to see a lot of different lines here. Some guys will shoot right up the center. Some of them will be on the inside and really get the car slowed down and make this super tight turn here. My preferred method is to definitely open up the entry as much as possible, roll as much speed through the center or into the middle of the corner as much as possible. This comes with some threats though. So looking from rear chase, this leaves all this room here for cars to send it up your inside. So this is definitely the faster line when you're not under any threat, but the closer the car behind is, the farther over you're going to want to be, absolutely. Now, something to keep in mind, this is a very important corner, so that's why we're spending so much time here. The farther over to the left you are, the tighter of a corner you're going to be, but it will be easier to get on throttle on exit, and that'll make the following corner a little bit less difficult. The farther over to the right you are, the more careful you need to be with a lot of your inputs. That's braking, turning, and your throttle on exit. The more speed we're carrying through here, especially now that we don't have as much aero, the car is a lot more sensitive and you can light the rear end up a lot more easily. So keep that in mind. Definitely try a lot of these different lines coming into the second to last corner because it will make a pretty big difference in your lap times. Now, finally getting through here, we can put our left side tires just into the grass. If you're putting the entire tire over here, the car has a tendency to break loose a little bit, and that makes the exit definitely a little bit more challenging than it needs to be. But we can put our left side tires just ever so slightly in here. That's going to help gain a little bit of rotation. It will also make it a little bit easier to keep your track out in somewhat of the middle of the track, as we're about to see. We can be just to the right of center on track out. If you track all the way out to the curbs on this right hand side here, that makes this next corner very, very difficult to be flat out through. I think it's pretty much guaranteed you'll have to lift in order to make that. So if we're just to the right of center or at center, we can actually be flat out through this last corner leading onto the start finish straight. We're going to get right up onto the curbing for our apex, and where we're aiming to track out is this little triangle that's created by the white line of the apron. You can actually even touch just the very corner of this grass here. So we don't need to slow the car down so much that we're keeping it tight. You definitely have plenty of room here. Now the reason why it's important to be aiming for this triangle, there's a little bit of banking here, so even though the car is going to feel very sketchy coming through this last corner, you're going to constantly be fighting oversteer, catching it, oversteer, catching it. Once we get into this section, this banking is actually going to help grip the car up, and it'll be a lot more stable. So we can track all the way out there even though the car is feeling really loose, and we'll definitely still be able to collect it on the very end of our exit. And that's going to be our lap guide, our lap reference for Indy Road Course. As always, if you guys have any questions, like I said, leave a comment below. Be happy to answer any of them, happy to help out in whatever way we can. Other than that, I wish you guys the best of luck in officials, and we'll see everybody next week.